So what we're seeing here is this is underneath your kneecap. So there's a little bit of this carpet, I was saying, a slightly furry surface, just from a wee bit of wear and tear, a wee bit of life. But that's on that side, and this is the kneecap floating above. So we're standing at your toes looking up the way, and that's me flexing and extending your knee. We're then coming down in the inside of your knee, and that's your inside cartilage we're looking at here, and it's pretty good actually. And I'm just using my little probe here to make sure there's not a split or a displaced fragment there.
Where's the stuff in between? Why is that?
This is the normal veneer on the surface. This here's your damaged cruciate ligament. See that bit looking at you?
Yeah.
It shouldn't really be looking at you.
Right,
Okay?
that's right, yeah.
Okay, so that's where it's come off. But there are some fibres that have been stretched but are still attached at the back, which we'll come back to in a moment.
Okay.
And then looking at the outside cartilage, and as we come to the back of the outside cartilage, you'll see there's a split running across here.
Right.
Now I'll use my probe in a moment, and that's a small tear. See that split in the cartilage?
Yeah.
And then also a partial tear in the undersurface. So when I go underneath with my probe, I can put it into the other side of it, just in there. Okay?
Yeah.
So what I then do is stitch this just to make sure it doesn't progress or extend, and to maximise healing. So this is like a cuff link.
What's
a tiny little 2 millimeter.
What's the foam?
That's fat actually from inside your own knee.
So that's me.
That's you.
Okay.
Okay. And this thing allows us to put a little. It's like a cuff link. It puts a tiny little anchor at the other side of the cartilage.
Yeah.
And then we have a sliding knot. And the nice thing about this system is it doesn't leave a knot inside the joint. And as I then tension this loop, it gathers the torn cartilage and closes it together to give it a chance to heal. So so you'll see as we slide this down with a wee pusher, I can take the slack out of this, snug the torn pieces together, and then cut it flush without leaving a knot inside the joint. So we don't need to be too worried about this. This is just to protect this because it was really only a partial tear.
They used to cut the whole meniscus out.
We did used to cut the whole thing out.
Yeah.
You're right, that wasn't great.
Yeah, my mother had that and then you get arthritis.
Yes, so that's not
Anyways.
good. So we're now starting to, this is the residual cruciate fibres. And the vibration is because I'm preparing a track for the internal brace through the fibres. Drilling in there. Now, this little device allows me to catch a red tube that I pass a suture right through the middle of the torn cruciate ligament. And as I retract the red plastic tube, the suture becomes visible, and I can take this little suture out. But these are all the ruptured fibres of your cruciate ligament. They should be stuck on the wall here. These are all ruptured, okay? So you can now see that one of the torn ends, one of the next torn bit, and the next torn bit. So I'm preparing this cruciate so that we can reapproximate it later. The next thing we have to do is get hold of the healthy cruciate fibres around the waist of the cruciate. And it's such a thick bit of tissue, it doesn't actually fire the first couple of times, but since I was videoing, I just kept it running. And the last time you'll see just here, it catches the suture and it creates a lasso around the waist of the cruciate that's torn. This is what we use later to slide it up over the internal brace, like pulling up a garter in a sock.
Gotcha.
So we then have, you'll see in a moment, the tissue that's torn, that I'm just tensioning up here.
How many holes? There's 2 or 3?
It's just 2 little holes. This is all just through 2 holes. And
you inject water or no?
There's water inside your knee.
Yeah.
That press my case.
Yes.
And this bit here, this is what we call the microfracture. So what I'm doing here is peppering the wall to encourage, just where the cruciate attaches, active bleeding. So the stem cells from the marrow will come onto this area when we reapproximate it and optimize the healing for you.
What do you do with all the torn fibres?
The torn fibres are pushed back onto that bed, and it's a healing bed, like a fertile bed to plant the fibres back into. So I'm tensioning your cruciate. I've then pulled the cinch up, and this is your cruciate ligament again, and this is actually a very normal appearance of a cruciate ligament. You can only so the internal brace is right through the middle, but the fibres are yours. You still get the proprioception, the blood supply.
Right,
this is your cruciate ligament coming up. This is it attaching to your femur. That's your posterior cruciate ligament. But that's all your own tissue. So what was flopped back like this has been plugged back at the top, prepared in a bed and put on top of it, and protected by the internal brace which runs all the way through it, like a seat belt to stop it stretching.
This is part of the femur too.
This is the other
femoral
side of
head.
the femur, absolutely right. That's the other side of the femur. This is the fatty tissue that sits between the posterior and anterior cruciate, and they're called cruciate because they're cross-shaped and they lock over each other.
Wow. Very good. So, so the internal brace is right.
It's
through there.
right. It's right through like a wick in a candle. It comes right. That's where you saw the vibrations, and then
And
the
so
red
it's-
tube
Yeah.
was everything passing through the middle.
So it takes 3 months for it to heal. Like, how do you confirm if it's healed
Well,
itself?
normally we can do it 2 ways. We can scan it as a reassurogram.
Yeah.
About 4 months is usually a good time
Yeah.
to do it because the swelling comes out of it. It's not as fluffy looking.
Uh-huh.
We were doing it in all of them to start with as a research tool,
Yeah.
and now we get very blasé about it, and we only scan ones that people are having problems with.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay,
it's
right.
our philosophy's changed the other way because we're just getting a bit more relaxed about it all.
Yeah.
But it looks good, and there's an example of. I'll show you an example.
Because the stage, maybe you mentioned this doctor that.
If I show you an example of